touchdown. It's through 50. He's got the speed. Touchdown.
Welcome into the latest episode of Mac and Mose. Andy McNamara, joined by the editor-in-chief of GoDucks.com, Rob Mosley. We are here to preview Oregon's second game of the season. It is the number 7 Ducks at the number 5 Michigan State Spartans. This is a return game in a home-and-home series. The Ducks with a big early season victory over the Spartans last year that really sort of sparked the Heisman campaign for Marcus Mariota, and gave Oregon some outstanding momentum, kept them very high in the polls. Michigan State responded, had an amazing season themselves. So sort of proof in that game, Rob, that you get rewarded a little bit, I think, for playing big games like that. And especially when you're on the road, you get a little bit of credit.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think if Mark Helfrich had his druthers, he might not be playing these games year in, year out. He's of the opinion that the best way to get into the college football playoff is to go undefeated. And you help your odds if you don't play another top 10 team this early in the season. But games like this and future games against Auburn and Ohio State, they're so great for fans across the country. They're great for, there's TV revenue involved, gate revenue, all that stuff that, makes it worthwhile in a lot of different ways. And again, as we've seen over the years, if you get respected by polls, voters, selection committees, whoever, by playing a tougher schedule too. So sure, you'd like to go undefeated, but also if you give one away early and it's to a tough team, that you can certainly bounce back.
Oregon and Michigan State both have one game under their belts against lesser opponents. Michigan State did have to go on the road for their first game. They went to Western Michigan, which is not in a Power 5 conference, but has an up-and-coming coach and an up-and-coming program, and got off to a fast start in that game and then just sort of cruised through the rest of it. Oregon, as we know, victorious over Eastern Washington 61-42 at Autzen Stadium. So, one game worth of film, one game worth of statistics to kind of look at. It's hard to get a full sense maybe of how this matchup will play out. Even though these two teams played last year, there are some key personnel changes. The Spartans still have Connor Cook as their quarterback. They don't have Jeremy Langford in the backfield anymore. Conversely, Oregon doesn't have Marcus Mariota anymore, but they still have Royce Freeman.
Yeah, Michigan State I think is scary in terms of the guys they brought back. You look at Connor Cook, senior, Jack Allen, their center, senior, Calhoun, the defensive end, senior. These are guys that could, by all rights, could have gone pro last year and came back, and it sort of reminds me of Mariota and Crayola and Grossu coming back to Oregon last year, and we saw how much that benefited the program having those kind of leaders around. So they're scary in that regard. They're going to be motivated. They've made no bones about the fact that they're out for revenge, redemption, whatever after last year's result. They're going to be at home. It's their home opener. The crowd's going to be fired up. It's going to be a heck of an atmosphere that the Ducks are going into.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Michigan State first. In that opening game against Western Michigan, Western Michigan came in, had a very good running back, very good running game and attack. They ended up with less yards than attempts overall in that game. So Michigan State's front seven, certainly was up to the task, and we saw that early in the game against Oregon last year, how strong they were. In the secondary, Western Michigan was able to have a little bit of success going over the top when they weren't being pressured in the backfield. Should mention that Michigan State had 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss in this game. So the quarterback was on the run a lot for Western Michigan. But when he was able to get loose and get free, they were able to complete passes downfield. This is a team that starts a redshirt freshman at one corner, a converted safety at another corner. So similar to Oregon, there's some youth in the defensive backfield, and that's probably going to be an area that I think you'll see. Not only we saw Western Michigan, I think you have to expect Oregon's going to try to throw the ball, and that's going to be just like the Ducks will be tested throughout the year. This is a game I think where we'll see Vernon Adams and the passing game really have to step up and they're going to attack.
Yeah, I think it was a 2-to-1 run to pass ratio for the Ducks last week, and as we talked about in reviewing the Eastern Washington game, they could have run all day. Royce Freeman I think I saw a stat this morning, he had 110 yards after contact. He was just running like a freight train in that game. But yeah, I'd expect to see a little closer to more of a 50-50 run-pass balance. And you look at some of the things that the Ducks can do. Charles Nelson says he's ready to go. Devin Allen and he might be close to coming back when he's talking to reporters this week. So from a personnel position. There's guys, new guys Oregon be able to throw out there. And then Mark Helfrich made note of the fact that they did very little in terms of using motion and shifting and things like that to get a defense off balance and create even more favorable matchups than might have already existed last week. And those are things they're going to be able to throw at Michigan State. New wrinkles that they've been working on throughout spring, summer, into preseason camp, that despite the fact that they played last year, this Oregon offense is going to have some new things to throw at Michigan State. So, I think the play calling will be really interesting to watch. The personnel, who the Ducks do end up fielding, will be interesting to watch. It's going to be fun to see these teams. I think both sides try to run the ball, how successful they are. Both sides, it's kind of similar. You probably feel like they can take some shots down the field based on the way things went for each team last week. So, how that plays out game plan wise is going to be fascinating to watch.
The offensive line for Oregon last week allowed just 1 sack, gave Vernon Adams plenty of time in the backfield to make plays, and that will be a major key in this one. As I mentioned, the Spartans with 7 sacks in the opening weekend, 11 tackles for loss. They are going to be bringing the pressure, and it's going to be a big task for the offensive line. We should point out Tyler Johnstone, the left tackle, making his first start in over a year after sitting out last year due to injury, leads the Outland Trophy watch list, I guess you could say at this point. They have a new grading scale that they're going to release every week, and after week 1, Tyler was number 1 on the list. So a great debut for him, a great debut for Oregon's new center, Matt Hegarty, who's like Vernon Adams, is a 5th-year transfer. So this is an offensive line unit, I think, going into this game that the Ducks hadn't suffered as many of their injuries going into the Michigan State game last year as we saw as the season progressed, but they were still a little bit dinged up after that opener, and so this should be a great early test for what is expected to be a strength of this Oregon team.
And those guys said the opener was kind of eye-opening for them in terms of tempo, that they thought they were ready to play at pace, and when the Ducks were scoring in 2.5 minutes every time, they were a little gassed. So they have that under their belt now. They know the level they need to practice at and play at in terms of tempo. Not to be overlooked is the tight ends. Ducks did a ton of 2 tight end stuff and left them in a lot. I think Bayless and Munt each only caught a couple passes for a dozen or so yards each, but they played a lot, and they played a lot in tandem. And that's a key to the running game too. So if the Ducks want to try to establish the ground game against this defensive front of Michigan State, Bayless and Munt, we could see Bayless and Munt, I imagine, again, as keys to that.
Yeah, that'll be a really, I think, fun thing to watch early in the game. How does Oregon come out and attack from the get-go?
Right.
Do they pass to open up the run? Do they try to run it? To start, we saw in games last year against big, powerful defenses, some really quick 3-and-outs when the Ducks try to throw on 1st and 2nd down. And, it can give momentum to the other team. We saw it in the Michigan State game, certainly in the Ohio State game at the end of the year. So does that change the coaching staff's philosophy or thinking at all in how they, how they try to compete against this type of defense?
Yeah, if I got Dwayne Stanford and Byron Marshall and Braylon Addison and Charles Nelson and Royce Freeman, shoot, I'm thinking, I'm going to go 5 wide empty a bunch of times and try to spread them out and throw it that way. And you got Vernon Adams dealing, but you got Royce Freeman too running the ball, and again we talked about how effective. I think Oregon's 485 rushing yards led the country last week.
It did.
So
yes.
You've got that too. So bottom line, I would expect the Ducks to be able to score in this game. At least somewhere in the area of 32, 35 points. So the question will be defensively, can they hold Michigan State below that?
Strong front 7, rather new secondary for Michigan State. Similar story for Oregon. Let's talk a little bit about the Michigan State offense now. Connor Cook, senior quarterback, came back. Most certainly would have been a first-round draft pick in the NFL draft. I mean, physically, he is a quarterback. I mean, he looks the part, has a strong arm, is actually fairly nimble in the pocket, and runs a little bit better than I think people probably give him credit for or assume he would just because of his size. But he can really sling it around. Had sort of I would characterize it as kind of a lackluster game against Western Michigan in the opener. He had a couple early touchdown passes to wide open receivers. For the game, he was actually under 50% completion-wise. So that's probably something that they're going to really dial in the focus this week and try to expose a young Oregon secondary. But we saw last year. I mean, he's got a great arm, and he can carry a lot of load for this offense.
This is a program with a tradition at quarterback. I mean, I think they get pegged as sort of a Big Ten mauler, ground game, pounded out offense. But I think I saw a stat that Mark D'Antonio, the Michigan State head coach, is the only college head coach who can boast of having multiple quarterbacks in line to be starters in the NFL week one. Going into this season, so that says something about the tradition that they're building there. And Cook is next in line there. We both came away really impressed. I'm not sure we knew much about him going into last year, and came away really impressed with just his presence, his pocket presence. But yeah, you wonder, completing less than half his passes, being that inefficient last week. Is there carryover to that, or is it just, hey, it's the first game, and maybe you're peeking ahead a little bit? I think Mark Helfrich made note. In both cases, Ducks and Michigan State went up 27-7, and in Oregon's case, Ducks go up 27-7, and the next possession is the one where Vernon Adams, comes up short on a ball to Kirk Merritt and nearly throws an interception. That might have even been the drive that also ended in Byron Marshall dropping a ball in the end zone. It just. The Ducks might have started to peek ahead a little bit and say, hey, we're up, we got this one, we're good to go. When, you got to obviously play it out, you got to finish. Defensively and offensively, you got to finish. And so I think that's a message that got driven home to them last week, and certainly I'm sure to Michigan State as well.
Well, Michigan State, they return the quarterback. They don't have Jeremy Langford in the backfield anymore, but from what we saw against Western Michigan, they have a stable of backs that are more than capable. Burbridge on the outside, one of the receivers, had team-high 4 catches, over 100 yards receiving. So he looks to be kind of an early favorite. They also don't have Lippett, who was their top receiver against the Ducks last year. Really, I mean, he looked like Cooper Kupp. If you want to make a comparison, he was catching everything and driving, giving Oregon fits in the game. So it's this. I saw a post this morning online about how this is kind of expected to possibly turn into a little bit of a shootout.
Yeah.
And you can see why with just the different sort of pieces in place that are similar for both teams. The different styles maybe of offense and defense, but head-to-head, when you take each one of those units against the other, there's opportunity for both sides to put points up.
You can't fault anybody for looking at Oregon's defense and going, oh, these guys are going to give up some more points until they shore some things up, until they prove otherwise. I mean, the front seven, they hold Eastern in the first 3 quarters, which is really kind of when things were, quote-unquote, maybe in the balance. Eastern rushed for less than 2.5 yards a carry. Ducks only had the 1 sack from Joe Walker, but Tyson Coleman had 2 instances. T.J. Daniel had at least 1 as well, where, they hit the quarterback right when he released it. So I don't think the pass rush was an issue last week. I think the front seven did a great job, but the pass defense as a whole has got to prove itself. The Ducks had some situations last week where Rodney Hardrick, Joe Walker were lined up on receivers, and they got burned. Those guys, they can't cover a Cooper Kupp. They're just not built for that. Rodney Hardrick admitted that this week, that this is more of a game he's looking forward to as a middle linebacker, because he wants to be hitting running backs inside the box, not trying to chase down receivers deep down the field. By the same token, Chris Cisse, Arion Springs, where are their heads at? Did that shake their confidence or not? I think there's got to be some concern about that, kind of where their heads are at after giving up some plays. I think coming out of that game, they felt a little bit better about how things went than Oregon fans did. Cisse had 9 tackles, led the team. So there's a point where he could get some confidence. I think Springs gave up that first early bomb, might have set up the first Eastern touchdown. And other than that, he played okay. Even when he was giving up some plays, he was right there. Ugo Amadi had kind of a tough debut, but it's a true freshman playing in his first game. He'll grow leaps and bounds from that. But still, we said last week, hey, and that's going to be a question mark kind of until they prove otherwise, and that remains the case. Until this secondary can sort of lock some things down and prove otherwise, they're going to get picked on a little bit.
And for me, I think this is a big game for Reggie Daniels and Tyree Robinson, the safeties for Oregon. Those are the 2 more veteran guys in the secondary, and possibly. Go in the first game, you didn't have Ifo Ekpreolamu, you didn't have Troy Hill, you didn't have Dargan, and veteran guys that everybody knows their job, and you don't have to maybe worry as much about who's doing what and communicating who needs to be where. And those 2 guys, and you hear Tyree in practice all the time. He's very vocal, which is a great thing.
Right.
But for whatever reason, it didn't translate in the game. And those 2 guys, they have to kind of take that group and own it and see. I'd like to see a lot more out of those guys. And the defensive staff even admitted, too, one of the things Oregon did such a great job of last year is you'd see 11 guys going to the ball. At the end of every play, there's all 11 guys around the ball, and they need to get back to that.
Yeah, and the good news is Tuesday in practice, I mean, that was, for me, the number one thing is how often that happened. There was one snap where it was, I mean, it wasn't 11, but it was 9 guys. Literally, there was a safety and a cornerback who were down the field covering guys, but the other 9 guys, literally, before the whistle was blown to end the rep, were around the ball. So I think that's something they really made a point of pride this week. Reggie Daniels is I totally agree with you. Given the way Eastern Washington was attacking over the middle of the field, attacking those linebackers in the pass game, you'd expect to hear a safety like Reggie Daniels' name called a little bit more. I'd expect him to be a little bit more engaged this week for sure.
Well, it's a first road game of the season for Oregon. The Ducks have had pretty good success away from Autzen Stadium in recent years, especially under Mark Helfrich. Tough game at Stanford a couple years ago, but other than that, pretty much an unblemished record for Oregon on the road. Their last trip to the state of Michigan was actually my first ever road trip with Oregon. That was back in 2007 when Dennis Dixon and Jonathan Stewart were doing their Statue of Liberty and fake Statue of Liberty show, and Jeremiah Johnson came out with a sledgehammer at halftime, and it
was memorable.
It was memorable. So hopefully more good memories in the state of Michigan coming up for Oregon. Again, it's the number 7 AP ranking Ducks at the number 5 Michigan State Spartans. Rob and I will be back with you early next week to wrap it up. We'll also have a little bit, we'll be able to talk a little bit about our other trip, our bonus trip. We're actually going from East Lansing down to Tampa Bay to cover Marcus Mariota's NFL debut. So we'll be able to talk a little bit about that as well. In the meantime, if you have questions for us, things you'd like us to discuss on Mac and Mose, you can get at us on Twitter. I am at McNamara UO. He is at Duck Football. Until next time, we'll see you.
Gets the corner into the end zone for the touchdown. It's through 50. He's got the speed. Touchdown.